Good morning, everyone. It's Friday morning here. I am Nick Slavic. I'm the proprietor of the Nick Slavic Painting and Restoration Company. I'm also the host of this program, Ask a Painter Live. It's a live Facebook program every Friday morning. You send in your questions, painting, restoration, wood finishing, furniture, remodels, construction, at least the coatings part of that, and I answer them live over Facebook here. So like I said, it is Friday morning. I'm in beautiful downtown historic New Prague. Behind me is the beautiful Bohemian Cathedral, St. Wenceslaus Church, a monument in our town, and I'm sitting high atop the Back and Neck Clinic in New Prague, a building that we are just putting the finishing touches on restoring today. We've been working on it part of the week here. This is a late 1800s building. It's been in many iterations, apothecaries, pharmacies, clinics. There's lots of laundromat, insurance office over the years. It's been in many iterations. Right now it's a back and neck clinic, a chiropractor's office. So there's a combination of blonde and red brick. There's a historic mural down on the other side of this one here. There is stucco. There is steel and aluminum siding, and just a whole host of sort of, as these downtown buildings go, kind of a mishmash of everything. So the trick is trying to get all these different textures, finishes, materials to work together, and I designed a historic scheme using Benjamin Moore's historic line of colors. It's kind of my go-to for that stuff, at least for a starting point, and turned out really well. I'll be posting some before and afters later today. And I have been posting some pictures during the week, so if you go through my feed, you can kind of watch the progress and see some of the colors that we'll be doing. This building, with the steel siding and the stucco and everything else, this was actually a fairly simple project as it goes. Intricate in, working around the public and Main Street and things like that, but everything had been painted before, so really it's sort of just a simple residential repaint, or the same process we would do for that. Wash where you need to, scrape where you need to, spot prime where you need to, and then 2 coats of a super high quality paint. For this one, because it was already previously painted, I used Benjamin Moore Aura. I used a low luster so that the owners here can wash the front of it. Historically on Main Street, there's tons of dust and dirt and grime from all these passing vehicles and things like that, and you can see sort of as you look down the Main Street here, sort of a dust, a settling of dust and a patina on the buildings like that. So I like to use a super tough low luster finish on those things so that the business owners here can wash it and clean it instead of repainting and things like that. So it was actually a pretty simple one. Bare stucco, bare brick. If they had me do any of that stuff that hadn't been painted before, I probably would have used a masonry specific elastomeric like Sherwin-Williams Loxon XP, something like that, which I did at the start of this week on a stucco home that had not been painted before. So it's kind of a toss-up. Proper coating for the proper job. A few words about fall painting. It is a bright, crisp morning here in New Prague, and we're sort of coming to the end of the exterior season now. Almost all water-based acrylic paints are rated in application to about 35 degrees. Now, most people mistake that for during the day. You have to remember that that's the lowest temperature that paint should come in contact with. I would say for at least a couple days, better to be a week or 2. So I have a self-imposed limit of about 40 degrees at night. Once it hits about 40 at night, you start running into some lingering dew and some possible, if you get in some low areas, lower areas out in the country and stuff like that, some areas can frost in other ways, versus higher areas elevation-wise. So you just have to be careful. So when you're out there staying in the deck, when you're trying to finish the last-minute projects, it should be at least 35 degrees and preferably 40 at night for at least a day or 2 to get those things set up. If you work too late into the evening with an acrylic paint too, a lot of times the dew will set and then run off of the building and it'll leave watermarks on it. Something you can do to alleviate that is obviously not add any extender or things in your paint, and also Sherwin-Williams makes a paint called Resilience, which I've experimented with over the years. Seems to help with it, but still a good practice is just watch the temperatures, watch the dew, watch the humidity. Good, dry, crisp fall days like this are great for painting. Paint dries quick, sets up good, and usually no worries about that sort of thing. So, all right, today, something I've been working on for a while now, theoretically, is something I'm going to call the Painter's Commandments and the Painter's Golden Rule. I've been compiling a sort of list of, I've been trying to figure out a good way to present the sort of non-negotiable, definite things, higher practices, strategies, of a professional painter. And in combination, it seems that I have a pretty good mix of professionals and homeowners watching this. So I tried to tailor this so that it'll suit both. The painter's commandments are sort of a short list of macro, strategic level sort of painting non-negotiables. We're not talking about tips like wrapping your roller in a bag overnight to keep it wet. We're not talking about objective, micro sort of tips like that. We're talking large level things like following technical data sheets, keeping a wet edge on your paint to prevent lap marks. And I'll present this in a little bit here, but I use the hashtag Painter's Commandments. I posted earlier this morning the actual document, my first draft, and I want to really stress that this is sort of a living document. I want input from homeowners, I want input from professionals. The name, I would prefer a different name, but I think everybody sort of understands where I'm coming from with it. I would prefer to sort of adjust and change and manipulate this list over the years here. So pros and homeowners, if you have any sort of like non-negotiables that you do while painting, and remember, we're going high level, macro, strategic sort of thinking. I will go through the list here in a second, and I apologize, Facebook Live does it in mirror. So like I said, I posted this document in an earlier post. Follow the hashtag Painter's Commandments. You'll pull it up, you can download this document, and send me your feedback. Again, if there's a better name for it, which I will be working on, let's do that. If you have anything to add, if you have anything that you want off the list. Already there's probably two that I thought was important to include, but don't quite fit. They're half tips and half sort of strategic stuff. So as we go through the list here, and I tried to organize it in a way that went from starting a paint job to ending a paint job in some sort of order, so they're not random like that. So number one, prep is most important. To me, it encompasses a lot of stuff. It's a very loaded sort of question, but it doesn't matter what paint you choose, how you put it on, what color you choose. If the substrate isn't prepared correctly, if you haven't go through the proper steps to make sure color will be held fast, if adhesion is good, it doesn't matter how good of a top coat you do on there, it's just not going to be a good job. This one needs to be a little more specific, and we'll work on the wording later. Perform scratch tests. This is all for adhesion. And again, with prep, we could be talking about plastic, taping, patching, drop cloths, washing, scraping, sanding, things like that. The scratch test is more of a I always talk about the two sort of adhesion tests that I use. There's the fingernail scratch test, and then there's the where you score it with you put some coating on, you score it with a utility knife, put some painter's tape over, pull it off, and see what you have. Scratch tests and crosshatch tests are sort of a non-negotiable for me when there's any question about coating adhesion. Prime for adhesion and color change. A lot of the times I will not prime for color changes, only because the paint nowadays is so good that most colors cover in two coats. We always run into problems. The areas where I use a primer for color would be if we're going from a deep dark color to a very light color, like a white or an off-white, and then a lot of times I'll use a primer just to cut the shine on the last paint, create a good adhesion, and then two coats of a top coat there. But most of the time it's for adhesion. Paints nowadays are very, very good. Even if they list themselves as a self-priming paint, I still prime underneath, because people expect a certain level of quality out of me, and there's really no excuse when something fails, and it's sort of belt and suspenders as far as I go. So another one there. Number 4, proper tool for the job. And mainly I'm talking about ladders, the properly sized ladder, proper type of ladder, and then how you apply the paint. Should you spray it? Should you roll it? Should you brush it? Should you do some combination of all of them? Should you do a different technique? Those are the big ones there, but along with all the other ones, this is very specific. Later today, in a couple hours, we're actually going to a project out in the country. There is a steel pole barn, a tin shed, or a horse barn, as it's known in other places in the country. There is a cinder block shed, and the house is a combination of masonite, LP, and other products like that. So it's a perfect, sort of project to encapsulate, I will be spraying the pre-finished metal pole shed, I will be rolling the block building, and I will be brushing the house. So it's one of those, use the proper tool. The sprayer is perfect for tin. It applies a nice heavy coat. There's really no pores to fill, and as long as you're maintaining a constant mill thickness, it's perfect for that. For the block, you still have to back roll or back brush. So really for me, you're not saving a whole lot of time there. And for the house, there's 3 colors, there's all sorts of stuff on it. It's a very intricate house. You would spend 4 days prepping it and half a day spraying it, and it's really not, we'd be much quicker with brushes on the house and then rollers on the block building too. So that's a perfect example of using the right tool for the job. Number 5, proper coatings for the job. This goes without saying that, like I was saying with masonry and steel siding and things like that, each one of those things has its own proper method for coating. Pre-finished steel, if you prime it right, you can use an industrial sort of elastomeric, direct to metal finish or a DTM finish, as most of the pros know it by. You can use a regular house paint if you prep it correctly, and there's a host of other things you can do. If it's already painted, just make sure whatever there is adhered well, and then you can go over it with whatever you like. So it just depends. Just like the masonry on the front of this building here, it was already painted, and it was in besides a little bit of fading, it was clean and it was in perfect shape. So basically all you have to do is use a super high quality acrylic paint over the top. Intermix paint. Again, this is sort of it's almost more of a tip, but I have to find a way to sort of, reword it, encompass it in some other principle of these painter's commandments. But basically, on a job, paint from the factory is amazingly consistent. Now, whenever a human touches it, there's the option for error in tinting, in mixing, in shaking, in delivery, and in application. So basically, I assume that anything that usually ever goes wrong with the color of paint, and you have some picture framing where the area you cut is different from the area you roll, like on an interior wall, I will almost say always that's human error. And a lot of the times with heavy masonry coatings and stuff too, the paint is so thick, you'll find a lot of streaks of colorant in there. So I'll usually ask the supply store to shake it 2 or 3 times just to make sure. When I get it on site, when we have a big job like this one coming up in the country, we will be 30 or 40 gallons of ore out there, and I'll start intermixing the paint right away between the 5-gallon buckets to have a consistent color throughout. Again, a little more of a tip, but I feel that there's something there that needs to be encompassed. So again, give me all your input on this stuff here, guys. 2 coats, number 7. 2 coats is sort of a non-negotiable thing for me. Especially nowadays where I constantly fight the bare paint, primer and paint in one sort of thing. Consumer Reports always rates it really high. I would say 10 or 12 times a year when I go to do an estimate, people have the Consumer Reports page printed out from their computer, and they show it, they say, why don't you use this paint? And I go through my sort of list of things, and I never try to denigrate or talk down about another paint. I simply try to explain why I use certain things. And the 2-coat thing is basically, I don't believe that almost anyone can do one perfect coat of paint on anything. If you are that person that can do that, you are sacrificing speed and efficiency. And also, if you are that person who can do one perfect coat of paint, you will not build a consistent shine in a paint if you're using a high quality paint like that. Even with the high end, the emeralds, the durations, the auras, things like that, where they tote, 1-coat coverage and most colors and things like that, you will not get that beautiful, professional, consistent finish unless you do the 2 coats. The first, especially, think of a situation like a home that's 5 or 10 years old, still has the original dead flat, chalky builder's paint on it. That first coat of high quality paint that you put on will soak up almost immediately. You have a hard time keeping that wet edge through the walls on the inside there, and it dries, and you can tell flashing right away where you cut and then you roll. That area that you overlap right here, it's going to be shinier. On that second coat, it evens out, it's beautiful, it's good. So for me, 2 coats is sort of a non-negotiable thing. Once in every 1,000 jobs, you find an application for a 1-coat. A white tin shed that's in perfect shape, that just needs an industrial coating over the top of it. There's other weird little applications. Maybe you have a deck with some deck stain, things like that. But honestly, always assume 2 coats, and that's sort of a high-level non-negotiable for me. Wet edge. Wet edge number 8, sort of a principle mainly in interior painting, maybe a little more also in exterior. Keeping a wet edge means basically you want whatever you paint. If you take an interior wall, for example, when you cut around the edges and you roll, you do not want to cut, let that dry, then roll in the middle. You're going to get that weird flashing like that again. A lot of the really high quality paints are a little more forgiving. They build a more consistent coat and they level out, and the sheen is fine. But when you start using lesser paints, you really start noticing the difference there, where you're building, if you do 2 coats brushing, 2 coats rolling, you basically have 4 coats of paint where it overlaps, and you can start telling a shine. So the way I alleviate that inside is my apprentices. I usually, the senior guy usually cuts, and the less senior apprentice will roll behind him, and we work in 2-man teams. So immediately when somebody starts cutting a wall, the apprentice is right behind him, keeping that wet edge going, and they move as a team around the room. Outside, what we do, we had a side of this building here with steel siding on it that had been previously painted, and it's a very dry day. And so to stop the lap marks, we put all the ladders up on the wall. There's 3 of us working yesterday, so we put all the ladders up. So basically, we just hop from ladder to ladder across the wall, moving as quick as we can to keep that wet edge moving, especially when you're brushing like that. So wet edge for me is a non-negotiable. When you get into high-end, low-luster finishes like the aura outside, you have to be really careful when you brush. It has a tendency to dry quickly, especially this time of the year. I'm not putting any extender in the paint because I want it to set up quicker, to be resilient to dew and mechanical abrasion and stuff. So you really have to watch out the wet edge. Number 9, paint in the shade. That's it's another one that's probably 60% tip, 40% principle, but it kind of goes without saying that inside we don't have to worry about it. Outside, paint flashes too quickly in the sun, and maybe this is almost encapsulated within the sort of keep a wet edge thing, but it was something that I really am surprised how few professional painters that I see adhere to this. And in the mornings, my crew and I, we circle around the house clockwise. At least here in the Midwest, the way the sun goes for us at certain times of years, we usually start off on the south side of the house, and usually between about 6 and 8 in the morning, get that done before the sun can really hit it, and then kind of move around progressively west, north, and then east again. So and circle the house in that way. So with the amount of guys I have and the way we apply paint, it seems that we keep a pretty good pace, and we seem to adhere to that pretty well. Number 10, systemize your painting. It's sort of a mantra that I keep telling my crew: top to bottom, left to right, top to bottom, left to right. The left to right is sort of negotiable a little bit. You can go right to left in some situations, but always when an apprentice comes up to me and says, where do we go next? What do we do next? What do you think? Where's the spot you want to be the least? It's high up on the wall, it's to the left, it's to the right, whatever, but it's always top to bottom, left to right, top to bottom, left to right. So every job I do is kind of unique. There's a different set of colors, homeowners, landscaping, exterior stuff, furniture to work around, but my goal is to make it as close to assembly line work in a factory as possible. The way you get consistency and quality is to have a system for everything you could possibly do, and it's tougher when you have unique projects like that, but my goal is to absolutely systemize everything we do. Even what we do at what times during the day. When we pull up to a job site with a truck full of apprentices, there's a systematic way that we unload and we set things up, and there's basically a list of things that we go through on the project, start to finish, in order like that, and the principles of that, top to bottom, left to right. So that's sort of a non-negotiable for me. Number 11, follow the technical data sheets. I think that's a very strong one. It kind of goes without saying. It's almost golden rule-ish. It kind of encapsulates most of this stuff. The only problem is the technical data sheets don't sort of get maybe a little more specific about some of this stuff. And it depends by brand. Some of them get very tip-oriented about keeping a wet edge, watch out for times of day and times of year, and some of them are very vague. The more professional, the more industrial coatings you use, it really only gives you scientific specs, mil thicknesses, application pressures for sprayers, things like that. But it kind of goes without saying that this is sort of golden rule-ish, because if every one of us professionals followed to a T the technical data sheets, there would be very few failures in the paint community, and our reputation would be built off of that. So it's tough to do. There's a lot of specs in there, and it's tough to keep your head in the game and do that, but I think that's a very strong painter's commandment. And number 12, be safe. I found over the years that back when my old man started me when I was 12 or 13, there was no safety protocol at all with this stuff. It was kind of the good old days of painting, where you threw up a huge ladder. It was probably covered with dirt, a little bit of rust and tarnish, and it didn't really work that well. The taller ladders usually had a bend in them. Maybe there was a little crack somewhere. One of the feet were missing. You'd pop it up on the roof. You just hop up there and you just cling to something for dear life and try to get the painting done cleanly. I found over the years that the safer that I've become, the more safety protocols that I've put into place, and the more formal safety training I've done, guys are quicker and jobs are more efficient. They feel safer doing the projects. They know that I'm looking out for them, and efficiency really, really climbs from that. So kind of goes without saying that there's no excuse for not being safe, and I actually enjoy a lot of I only carry around usually about one Rubbermaid tote extra of safety equipment, and it makes all the job sites better, easier, and it works pretty well. And finally, what I'm proposing on the bottom here is sort of the golden question of the painting contractor. It's sort of based, the golden rule-ish sort of thing, but what I find myself asking all the time, and I've been introduced to the nationwide, worldwide painting community about a year or two ago, and I was introduced by a friend into the PDCA, the Painting and Decorating Contractors of America, sort of the largest trade group. I'm always super skeptical of large trade groups like this. Seems to be lots of dudes in polo shirts who like to take off work and eat free, continental breakfasts. But I was a little surprised. There was a lot of really, really good people there when I went to the expo, the sort of yearly nationwide expo down in New Orleans last year, and I was really inspired by a lot of the painters. Also, there's lots of business consultants, and there's lots of guys who have different forms of painting company from me, and my sort of perspective on my own trade and everything was sort of expanded. And through all the presentations I listened to, through all the people I talked to, 75% I was really inspired and motivated, and I came back with a full head of steam thinking about my own business, my own life, and philosophy about everything. And 25%, give or take, was sort of, it seems like certain contractors have a tendency, and this is not specific to painters, I don't want to denigrate our own trade, but it seems like everything we try to do is to make more money, save more time, and there's very little talk about being the best painter, having the happiest customers, things like that. So my sort of golden rule is, when I was sitting through a lot of these presentations, and when I talk to certain painters who do a certain sort of business, I'm always asked, are we doing this, and what we're doing, is it better for the homeowner, or is it better for us, or is it some combination of both? So whenever I think about a coating, trim enamels, hybrid oils, and pure oils are a pain in the rear end to work with, but they are better for the homeowner. I will take that extra effort and extra labor and extra skill that's needed to apply that, because I know it's better for the homeowner. So everything I do with my painting business, I always ask myself, is this better for the homeowner, or is it better for me? Going exterior paint, Benjamin Moore Ora's my sort of go-to, 70 to 75 bucks a gallon retail. It would be much better for me to go to Menards or another big box store and get some Dutch Boy for $12 a gallon and put that on the house. But the minimal benefit that I see from the savings of that is a horrible result for the homeowner, and it's sort of a non-negotiable for me. So in that case, it's much better for the homeowner. It might be a little worse for me, budgeting that in, but when people hire me, they expect a certain level of quality, and there's sort of no excuse, like I said before. So, contractors, I want feedback on all this. There's the, painter's commandments. There's the sort of golden rule-ish, golden question that we should sort of be guiding ourselves by. Homeowners, I want to hear what you guys think. We're trying to give you an insight as professionals as to, how we do our job, what we think about. If there's something that you would like to see on this list, I would like to rename it. Send me suggestions for the name. Every time you send a suggestion, hashtag it Painter's Commandment. I will compile those things. I can't stress this enough. This is not set in stone. If we go down to 6, if we go up to 20, if we change the name, if we change the concept of it, this is sort of, in a negotiation, this is the first offer. And I'm offering this to everybody out here. Give me your input. I would really like to hear how this document would move and live and change with the coming years here. So yeah, however we find benefit out of this, I hope there's something to the homeowners, and I hope there's something for the professionals as well. So thank you guys for watching again here. Before I leave, this is just a beautiful morning here. I'm going to flip this around and kind of show you my view here. So, this beautiful morning, we got the Bohemian Cathedral here with early Mass going. Beautiful sunrise here. Everybody shuffling around, getting their day started here. Beautiful morning in New Prague. It's going to be a beautiful morning. So, if you find value in Ask a Painter, please send me all your questions. I'm happy to answer any of those. Like it, share it. There's a follow button on the live feed. You can get automatic notifications when I go live. And like I always say, these videos will be archived not only on my Facebook page, on my YouTube channel, Nick Slavic Painting and Restoration, where we number them and describe them. And if you have any questions that you think might be answered already, you can go through, watch them, and give me some feedback on those. I'm just going to scroll through and make sure I didn't forget any questions here. All right. Matt McHugh, thank you. Great tips on safety. Show us the ingredients in a tote. Well, actually, you know what? Through the Painting and Decorating Contractors of America, next Friday, I believe it's the 28th at noon, I will be doing a sort of simulcast between Ask a Painter and live in the field training for the National PDCA Association. So the topic of that will actually be truck organization, and I will break down one of my trucks. I will show you how I put the ladders on, all my totes, all my ladders, how I pack the back of my truck, how I organize. I'll take it all out, I'll lay it out for you, and one of those totes will be that safety tote. So I'd be happy to go through all that. That'll be next Friday, the 28th at noon. That'll be through the PDCA National. There will be a link on my Facebook site, but yeah, look forward to that, guys. I'll be sending out reminders for that, and so that'll sort of act as my Ask a Painter for next week, and it'll be also archived in the Contractor College of the PDCA on their website too. So thank you, guys. I appreciate all this, and please, I really want this to be a living document. I think this is something as pros and homeowners we should work on together to get both perspectives on, and I can't wait to hear your suggestions. So send all those suggestions to hashtag them with Painter's Commandments, and send me all your questions. I love answering questions off the cuff about any of your painting, finishing, staining, furniture, interior, exterior, industrial projects, whatever. And yeah, I'll look forward to all those. So we'll see you guys next week, and have a good weekend.